The secret behind levitation. Levitation remains mysterious. However, by now several facts should be clear. First, levitation is true. With more than 330 reported cases, we can safely conclude that levitation is a valid phenomena that has recurred regularly throughout history. With so many cases from such a wide variety of credible sources, such as each following similar patterns, it would be exceedingly unscientific to reject the testimony as being too incredible. Nor can the accounts be regulated to blanket explanations of hoaxes, hallucinations, or misinterpretations, misperceptions. Again, there are too many accounts involving too many witnesses of unimpeachable integrity, and there is, of course, the photographic and laboratory evidence. The experiments of Baron Schrenck-Notzing, William Crookes, Charles Richet, Herward Carrington, and others have proven conclusively that levitation is real. First, let us analyze the reported cases and break them down into 7 categories. 1. Ecstatic levitation. These cases involve levitations usually of nuns, monks, priests, etc., caused by religious prayer. It can last for seconds, minutes, or even hours. It usually occurs spontaneously, but can be induced. It is the second most common type of levitation. Meditational levitation. These cases involve yogis, mystics, sorcerers, etc., who through meditative and physiological techniques are able to initiate and control levitation events. It is the third most common type of levitation. Crisis levitation. These cases involve all kinds of people. The vast majority involves falls, with a few cases of illnesses. In most cases, the episodes last only a few seconds, though they can last minutes or even hours. Mediumistic levitation. By far, these are the most common, most demonstrated, and most studied. They can be induced or sometimes involve uncontrolled poltergeist-like manifestations, including in extreme cases possession. In about 1/3 of the cases, the victims were reported to be possessed. These cases can usually only be performed under seance conditions and are only partially controllable. Spontaneous levitation. The vast majority of these cases involve children, though there are a few adult cases. Several of the cases involve children who fly down staircases. Many children express the belief that they can fly. In fact, according to the biographer Tolkien, the Russian author Tolstoy may have experienced a levitation episode during his childhood. At age 9, Tolstoy believed he had the ability to fly, and he actually leapt out of a 2-story window and suffered a concussion. However, even to adulthood, he firmly believed that he had the ability to levitate. Winston Churchill also expressed similar beliefs. At age 18, leapt off of a bridge into treetops below, believing that he could fly. Many people, especially children, believe that they can fly, and in some cases, they seem to be right. Traveling levitations. The second rarest category. The accounts of running levitation are remarkably consistent, whether it involves a 15th century nun, a Tibetan Longompa, Native American swift runners, holy lamas, or an American schoolgirl. The effect is the same, as Ikawai's tracks showed, as Alexandra David Neal witnessed, and as Kelly Merle so vividly described, saying, "I had a way of running, where I was barely touching the ground." It is clear that the same phenomena is involved. In most cases, it appears to take specific training. However, in others, it appears to manifest naturally. Cases of walking on water fit well into this category. Sleeping levitations. The rarest type of levitation occurs only when the recipient is sleeping. Therefore, there are few actual first-hand reports coming from levitators themselves. In a few cases, people did wake up to find themselves levitating, Johnson Smirl. However, both were living in haunted houses, and so this phenomena could be related to mediumistic levitation. In one case, the ability was carried from mother to daughter. While levitation remains mysterious, there are obvious patterns. Many cases of levitation share several common elements. According to researcher David Orme Johnson, these include an awareness that the body is pervaded by space, a sense of lightness, an upward current of energy, trembling and fast breathing, hopping, and finally hovering. This pattern is exhibited in only certain cases of meditational levitation. There are other patterns. In most cases, there is a degree of disassociation involved. With meditative, mediumistic, and ecstatic levitation, the levitator is often in a trance state. With crisis levitation, there is disassociation caused by trauma. Running levitation is also very meditative. Sleeping is a profound form of disassociation and perfectly fits this pattern. Disassociation is an experience of mind-body separation. Examples include meditation, prayer, sleep hypnosis, out-of-body experiences, the use of a Ouija board, physical trauma, etc. Frequently, there are peculiar physiological effects as a result of levitation. In some cases, the limbs will become temporarily rigid, and the levitator may feel an electric type of force lifting the body. In most cases, there is no sensation of hands lifting the body. Rather, the body seems to rise, but not by being pushed or pulled, but drawn upwards. However, some mediumistic levitators do report feeling hands lift them into the air. Some levitators report a shortness of breath. In a few cases, the levitators were exhausted by the ordeal. Others energized. Some report healings. In a small percentage of cases, levitators emit white light from their bodies. Levitation may be hard to believe, but it comes down to one simple fact. Levitation is real, and it is happening across the world. The next step is to analyze the various aspects of the phenomena. Strength of levitations. Levitation is an extraordinarily complex phenomenon. One curious aspect of the experience is the sheer force involved. Out of the hundreds of cases, there are several which witnesses have attempted to end the levitation or pull the levitator down. In most cases, they are unsuccessful. In several cases, even the strength of several full-grown men was insufficient to pull the levitator down. Clearly, a great amount of force is in operation. According to von Gores, it is impossible to physically push levitators to the ground. While some accounts support this assertion, others involve accounts in which witnesses were easily able to move the levitators by lifting them lightly or even blowing on them. Interestingly, some levitators also report increased strength. One example is of Saint Joseph of Cupertino, who was able to lift a heavy wooden cross which 10 men couldn't lift. Daniel Home also reported an event in which he was able to lift a heavy log. Saint Bosco could reportedly hammer nails with his bare fist. Multiple levitations. The force which causes levitation can be contagious. In several accounts, Cupertino, Keller, Volhart, those who physically grabbed or even touched the levitator were also levitated. There are a few cases of 3 people being simultaneously levitated, though none of 4 or more. One possible theory, then, is that of, as of yet, an unidentified section of the electromagnetic spectrum which causes levitation, creates a field around the levitator which is, in some occasions, large enough or strong enough to levitate others who are adjacent to or physically touching the levitator. This theory is also supported by the many accounts in which people have been levitated along with the chair, stool, bed, or other furniture. What triggers levitation? Most of the saints found themselves levitating as a result of intense, prolonged, and fervent prayer. The events occur spontaneously, though for some it may be provoked by a mere exposure to religious paraphernalia, or even something beautiful, like pomegranate seeds or music. On the other hand, meditational levitators simply have to concentrate, and they are able to levitate at will. Spontaneous levitation occurs for no apparent reason, but most often to young children. As we have seen, illness and sleep can provoke levitations. Another repetitive cause includes falls. In several mediumistic cases, levitation was caused when the onlooker either began an exorcism ritual or specifically asked the alleged spirits for a levitation display. Raja Lakshmi reported that her levitation occurred as a direct result of reading the book The Gospel of Ramakrishna, The book is 1,000 pages in length and outlines inspirational conversations about God between the spiritually enlightened master, Sir Ramakrishna, himself a levitator, and his devotees. Is levitation hereditary? Leroy doubted that levitation had any genetic component. At that time, the only evidence supporting this was the case of the royal family of Hungary, which involved a levitation of several family members. However, today, several other cases have surfaced. The case cited by Joseph Weed involves a lady who could reduce her weight, an ability that her mother also had, and another case cited by Hadsel involves a mother and daughter who both experienced episodes of sleeping levitation. There are a few cases of mediumistic levitating families, such as the family that Yermolayev was introduced to in Russia. Other examples are Rudy and Willie Schneider, the Harper sisters, and the Davenport brothers, all of whom experienced mediumistic levitation. There is also one case of an anonymous man and his son, Jacquin. The above cases, however, appear to be the exceptions. The great majority of cases involve unrelated people. While there may be some genetic factors involved, clearly anybody can levitate. Can levitations be stopped? In the vast majority of cases, the levitators are not disturbed. In some cases, however, onlookers attempt to end the levitations. In most cases, they are unsuccessful, though in a few cases, witnesses were able to stop the levitations by physically restraining the person. In a few cases, the levitators could be brought down by calling their name or playing music. St. Joseph of Cupertino stopped levitating for 2 years following severe reprimands from his superior. He was also called down on at least 2 occasions by name, though usually he was insensible during his trances. Sometimes the levitators themselves tried to stop their episodes from occurring. In some cases they were successful. Raja Lakshmi and other cases were not. Teresa of Avila. Mediumistic levitations have the same paradox. In some cases, levitations are easily stopped, home, while in other cases, all efforts to end it fail. Fontaine and Reisinger. Meditational levitations can apparently start and stop the episodes at will. Levitators. The ability to stop a levitation event appears to depend mostly upon the levitator's experience with or understanding of levitation. Controlling of levitation. The levitators report widely varying degrees of control of their flights. The saints generally report little or no control. Most could neither start nor stop their episodes, nor control their flights. Furthermore, their bodies often became rigid and their awareness of their surroundings sometimes diminished. Cupertino did report some control in that he was able to lift a cross and maneuver around objects to reach an altar. Other times, however, he remained insensible. St. Francis of Assisi also apparently could levitate at will, as he used his ability to convert followers. Meditational levitators, however, report much better control, with several yogis reporting the ability of traveling levitation, the most highly controlled form of levitation, or the ability to move long distances while avoiding obstacles such as walls, trees, and doorways, or reach considerable heights. Mediumistic levitators seem to levitate only at the whim of their spirit friends, and usually only during seance conditions. However, the best mediums were able to produce levitation phenomenon fairly regularly. Crisis levitation is, by nature, not controllable, as it only occurs during accident or illness, and then only rarely. Sleeping levitators obviously have no control whatsoever. Spontaneous levitators do report a small measure of control, being able to turn corners and fly up and down stairs. The control of a levitation seems to correspond to the levitator's experience with the phenomena. Meditational levitators therefore have the greatest degree of control. Length of levitations. How long is the average levitation, writes Fodor? Mediumistic levitations seldom exceed a few seconds. 10 minutes is far beyond the achievements of the saints. The average length of levitations is hard to ascertain. Crisis and spontaneous levitators are typically brief, lasting seconds, with one outlying case lasting an hour. Mediumistic levitations typically last from 15 seconds to 3 minutes, with a few longer cases, particularly those involving demonic possession. The longest lasting 30 minutes, There is very little information on the length of running levitations, though some Native American runners were reportedly able to continuously run for 3 days or more. The length of sleeping levitations is also hard to determine for the obvious reason that the levitator is not aware of the levitating. However, it appears that these episodes last anywhere from a few seconds to a few hours. This brings us to ecstatic and meditational levitation, both of which typically last a few minutes to a few hours, or in a few outlying cases up to 24 hours. Heights of levitation. The height of the average levitation varies from 1 or 2 inches to several thousand feet. The vast majority of cases, however, involve levitation being a few inches and 3 feet off the ground. According to some sources, the height of levitation corresponds to the spiritual level of the levitator. In a few cases support this theory, i.e. Princess Shoki Narus. Some saints reportedly levitated up to heights of the tallest trees. There are several cases of meditational levitators reaching 100 feet or more. The highest reported case is that of monk Liang Pu Wen, seen at several thousand feet by several airline pilots. Credibility of evidence. The main argument against the validity of levitation is the perceived lack of hard evidence. Mainstream science will never accept these accounts until levitation can be demonstrated as a repeatable, controlled experiment using scientific methodology. This has actually occurred with several levitators, including the case of Palladino, Vaticoni, Mirabelli, Zuccherini, Holm, Indridson, Ruggieri, Schneider, and others. Lack of evidence, however, doesn't mean that levitation isn't a valid phenomenon. However, many people have photographed somebody getting struck by lightning. Almost none, and yet it happens hundreds of times a year. As Murphy writes, levitation may only occur during a rare and spontaneous ecstasies that cannot be programmed to meet the requirements of a scientific experiment. Superordinary lifting from the ground, if it in fact occurs, would require an improbable set of circumstances, which a scientist would be lucky to witness. Levitation, like other holy powers, which have to be caught in the wild. And remember, levitation has been photographed many times, including Mirabelli, Fattuccioni, Zuccherini, Meloni, Harper, Evans, Awaka, Volhart, Pulavar, Rajalakshmi, Osami, Narus, and others. The foundation of science is observation and anecdotal evidence. It is crucial to the process. While the hard evidence supporting levitation is limited to a few dozen studies, at most, the circumstantial evidence is mountainous and is of the highest quality. With so many accounts, levitation as a phenomena is firmly established. The credibility of the levitators and witnesses is, in many cases, beyond reproach, particularly in the case of the saints who lived exceedingly austere and moral lifestyles. As a rule, tried to hide and end their levitation episodes rather than flaunt and encourage them. Leroy writes, the chances of willful deception diminish to the proportion that the witnesses are more honorable and more numerous. Of the saints, Leroy wrote, it is necessary to insist here that the moral quality of these witnesses is exceptional and vetoes any fabrication of their depositions. In the second half of Leroy's book, he conducted an analysis of the evidence. He was surprisingly skeptical of many of the cases, claiming that the hagiographers and many have exaggerated accounts of levitation out of devotional zeal. He believed that subjective impressions of levitation could be rejected outright as being unverifiable. As he says, for this reason, the sensation of levitations described by St. Teresa of Avila, St. Catherine of Siena, or St. Philip of Neri would be regarded as a priori as imaginary. While he later affirmed that these cases, because they had outside witnesses, he approached the subject from a very skeptical viewpoint. With a strong religious prejudice, Leroy rejected virtually all cases not involving saints. However, even then, he could conclude that levitation is a reality, one that demands objective analysis. As he wrote, if levitation is a true fact, historically proven, it takes a new interest for us, more immediate, more material. As far as we believe, it is a subjective impression. It barely matters to us. But now that we are dealing with a physical, objective phenomena of the mystical life, we are disposed to examine it more clearly, and to particularly note the details and surroundings. The historic proofs for the reality of levitation are both numerous and solid. If the reality of this phenomenon must be rejected, it is not able to be by virtue of prior views on its possibility, but on the study of the testimonies which affirm it. The objective look at the study of levitation reveals a surprising number of cases with considerable evidence, certainly enough evidence to hold up in a court of law. Again, several of the levitations were performed under controlled laboratory conditions in front of eminent scientists: Home, Palladino, Schneider, Mirabelli, Zuccherini. Hereward Carrington was actually able to prove levitation as a demonstrable scientific fact using an ingenious experiment. See the next chapter. Skeptics will have to explain the photographs of levitations, not to mention the number of witnesses to these events. The levitations of Cupertino, Home, Liguori, and Avila are supported by literally hundreds of witnesses. The evidence collected in the book, I think, conclusively proves that levitation is a fact. Of course, some cases are better than others. Although the sheer volume of accounts is more than enough to convince any reasonable person, many cases lack good documentation. The ideal case involves multiple living witnesses of high credibility, repeated levitations, photographs, and statements from the levitator, also of high credibility. No single case fits all these criteria. Using these criteria, however, the 10 best cases of levitation in the author's opinion is in ascending order. Number 10, Janet Harper. This case particularly solid because the phenomenon surrounding her was observed by so many people and occurred in modern times. Her case of levitation was observed by multiple living witnesses who provided testimonials and were also affirmed by her. Finally, the levitations were also photographed. Number 9, Raja Lakshmi. This case is well verified in many respects. The main witnesses is still alive as of the printing of this text, and is of the highest credibility. Holding a position as a professor and leader of a yoga institute, her levitations were witnessed by numerous people and were also photographed. Alphonse Liguori. Although this case occurred a long time ago, an extremely large number of credible witnesses left written testimonies under oath testifying to the veracity of his levitations. Zuccherini. This case is reputable because it involves several scientists who were able to photograph the levitations of the medium on multiple occasions under controlled conditions. Mirabelli. The fact that this man was able to levitate before a group of scientists for a period of 10 minutes, during which time they closely observed and photographed him, makes this case hard to dispute. He was also seen to levitate on several other occasions in front of numerous witnesses. Sainton Moses. As a minister and college professor, Moses's integrity is impeccable. Combined with his own testimony of his levitations and the fact that they were witnessed by multiple people on at least 10 separate occasions, makes his case one of the best verified in history. Joseph Cupertino. Although this case occurred hundreds of years ago, the enormous number of witnesses, 92, and their credibility, popes, dukes, priests, nuns, makes this case particularly hard to dismiss. Also, the fact that the witnesses were under oath makes their testimonies even more credible. Eusapia Palladino. The levitations of this medium were witnessed by numerous and very influential scientists, Crookes, Richet, across Europe. Her levitations were constantly produced in controlled laboratory conditions. She was able to produce levitations across Europe for more than a decade. Teresa of Avila. This case is supported not only by voluminous statements from Saint Teresa herself, but by numerous highly reputable witnesses who left eyewitness testimonies under oath. Daniel Home, number 1. This is the single best case of all time simply because so many credible people have observed Home to levitate on so many different occasions under so many different conditions. He levitated before numerous heads of state, kings, queens, dukes, before leaders in their fields of science, art, and literature. He was never once caught in fraud and produced numerous other miracles, including healings, elongation, incombustibility, superhuman strength, prophecy, and more. But it was his levitations that were verified on at least 100 occasions. Other highly credible levitators also deserve special mention, including the cases of Schneider, Indridson, Yermolayev, Ruggieri, Bartlett, Narus, and Meloni, to mention only a few. Anyone skeptical of levitations must explain these cases. Is levitation generated internally or externally? The force that causes levitation is invisible, powerful, and in some cases controllable, but it is generated by an outside force such as spirits. Is it generated by an outside force or an inside force such as the human body? The evidence is strong for both theories. Mediumistic levitation seems to be caused by spirits of deceased people. These levitations often occur simultaneously with haunting activity attributed by ghosts, researchers to spirits. Some of the mediumistic levitations also report the feeling and sensation of hands gripping and lifting them. In a few cases, hands are seen, or the identity of the affecting spirit is actually named and identified. In the other hand, the evidence is fairly conclusive that meditational levitation is internally generated by the human organism. According to yogic tradition, levitation is an ability that is potentially available to anyone. Many levitation accounts originate from people who have learned to levitate as a skill using specific procedures. Most levitations, such as sleeping, running, and spontaneous levitations, also appear to be internally generated, whereas crisis levitations, it is difficult to say. It appears that levitation is, in some cases, caused by an outside force, mediumistic, and in other cases is internally generated, meditational. Interestingly, while many mediumistic cases only take place in low light levels, many meditational levitations involve light being emitted from the body. However, some mediumistic levitations also emit light. In either case, however, it seems clear that the same actual force is involved. Locations of levitations. An analysis of the locations of these events shows that they take place virtually everywhere. In all cultures, they take place inside and outside, in darkness and in light, in churches, homes, courts, buildings, hallways, fields, forests, gardens, over rivers, even on boats. The majority of levitating saints come from Europe, with many from Italy. Eastern countries such as Tibet and India are the leading producers of meditational levitators. Otherwise, levitations are distributed rather equally throughout the world. As we have seen, however, the era and location of a levitation event can have a profound effect on how the event is interpreted, with two extremes being canonized as a saint or execution as a witch. Researcher Doshin Gersi personally witnessed several shamans perform ceremonies in which they levitated, disappeared, or dematerialized. After witnessing such events, he became aware of a peculiar detail, writes Gersi. I noticed that my eyes picked up a distinct image. This image was always the same. The person who had just disappeared, seen from the back, appeared to be followed by something that looked like a bunch of feathers. In pondering this, my first thought was that it looked like someone riding a broom, an image similar to representations of witches traveling to their Sabbaths. Could this be the origin of witches flying on brooms? Gersi thinks it may be. Later, he had the opportunity to visit a sorcerer in Papua New Guinea. The sorcerers are called Kasawari men, after a native ostrich-like bird with large tail feathers. The reason for this name is because witnesses to the dematerialization or teleportation of the sorcerers received the visual impression that the sorcerers were flying or riding away on a cassowary. Gersi was given a demonstration and reports that he saw exactly the same optical effect that he observed in the Haitian voodoo ceremonies. Gersi received further confirmation of this worldwide phenomena when he visited the Middle East, writes Gersi. In Arabia, when people saw a magician dematerializing, I have met some Arabs who claim that such magicians still exist nowadays. They also picked up on the image I have described. Since their cultural references include neither cassowaries nor brooms, Arab witnesses perceive the image as being the tasseled end of a carpet. These gave rise to tales of people traveling on flying carpets. In each of these cultures, people ascribed the image their eyes picked up to whatever it was that they already knew: a broom, a cassowary, carpet. This phenomena at least gives evidence that something powerful goes on that specific moment. Otherwise, why would people of different cultures living in different times experience the same image? Witnesses to levitations. While there are many first-hand accounts of levitation in this book, most accounts are recorded only if there are outside witnesses. Anyone can claim to levitate, but those who are able to demonstrate it in front of witnesses comprise the majority of accounts. Interestingly, because the ability to levitate attracts so much attention, the witnesses are often people of extremely high societal standing. The roster of witnesses attesting to these events is impressive and includes not only the ordinary people, but influential leaders in science, medicine, religion, politics, business, arts, and literature. Kings, queens, heads of state, emperors, popes, cardinals, dukes, famous authors, leading scientists, prominent physicians, professors, archbishops, politicians, business leaders, all are among the witnesses to various levitations. In fact, it is their testimonies that form the bulk of the evidence supporting the veracity of levitation. All right, well, we'll go ahead and do that as part one.